Hello developers, how you all guys doing? In the previous video we have built a pagination application, and in this video let's extend that and add the functionality to create a new user, edit an existing user, and also delete users. Let's get started, guys. So before jumping in, I just want to cover a small thing that I missed in my React and FastAPI pagination video, which was my recent video, and you can check that out from the info cards. So in that, I just got a comment asking about the CORS issue that they have been facing. So basically the issue is due to this piece of code which you are missing, because I did not cover that and I forgot about that. So my apologies about that. But it is basically fast API, which is restricting the API calls from your React front-end application because of the cross-origin resource sharing. So your front-end is sitting on the 3000 port of localhost, and fast API is sitting on the 8000 port, which creates a cross-origin resource sharing. So if you want to overcome that and allow any origin to access the API, you can just use this add middleware method of the app, which is FastAPI app, and you can import this CORS middleware, which you will find in the fastapi.middleware.CORS. It is directly provided from Starlet. So yeah, once you add that and you give the necessary options, it will basically allow any of the origin to access the API. But in our case, to make it more secure and make it more closed, you just can add so this would only allow your React frontend in your local development build to run. So once you push it to your production, it is expected that you have a list of origins in the .env file and then pull that variable from the environment variables. But for now, I'm just gonna leave it as is. Before starting, if you have missed the previous video, please check that out and get back to this video to get more clarity. You can find that from the info card right here. To get a quick recap, what we have done till now is that we have a nice user model which has ID, name, email, and a picture URL. Of course, from our random user.me API, which is really cool. And then we have a get data function, which will be called whenever the fast API starts up, and it will hit our random users.me website and gets a random users and then stores them in the app state. We also have the two endpoints which we have built. One is the home endpoint and the other one is the users endpoint, which we paginated already. Let's discuss what we are going to build now. We are going to build the CRUD operations. It will stand for create, read, update, and delete. In our case, create will be a create user endpoint, which will be a post method, and a read endpoint would be a get method, which we already kind of built, so I'm not going to cover that. And then the update, which will be a patch endpoint or maybe put endpoint. I'm going to use a patch method, so it will be update user. And the last one will be a delete endpoint, so it will just delete the users. So let me just write the create endpoint dot post. I'm gonna call that create user, and the function name is gonna be the same, and it's gonna get user info. Okay, so I want this user info to be coming in the request body, so let me specify that to FastAPI by importing body. And also I want the body to be a kind of a class, so I don't want to specify each attribute like this, like name, email, and picture URL in the function parameters. Rather, I would like to have a single object of a class so that FastAPI can generate the fields on its own. So for that, I can directly use the user class, but we have the ID parameter which we don't want to be set by an external user. So if someone comes and tries to set an ID which is already existing in the database, that would create a conflict. So I don't want the external user or the one using our API to be able to set the ID. So while creating the user, I'm not give them the feasibility to send the ID also. So ID is something which I'm gonna set on my own. So for that, I want to create another class which is basically the same class, but I'm gonna call that raw user, which will not have an ID, of course. And as the code is repeating itself here, I don't want to write the same thing over and over again. So I just want to remove the access fields from the user class and inherit from the raw user. So yeah, so we will use this class as the request object. So I'm gonna say that user info is of type raw user, and that would generate all the fields required. So I want to say that FastAPI should look in the body for that, so that we have the function ready now. I'm just putting pass for now. Let's complete the function later. First, just look at this Swagger UI and look at the advantage of using raw user. So let me go to the server, and I'm using ppnv, by the way, which is why you see the pip files in the source code. And by the way, the source code will be in the pinned comment for this video and the previous videos as well. Please check that out if you need to. And I'm using ppnv. You can use whatever shell environment that you will find useful for you. So I have activated that, and I'm just going to run. Okay, so it is running. I just reload and go to the docs, I'll get the Swagger UI, and you can see apart from the two endpoints which we have already created, I have a new endpoint, create user, which is a post endpoint, just the same thing which we have done here. And you can see it has also generated a sample request, which is really cool. That's the advantage of using a model here, and it doesn't need an ID. Okay, so now let's just try to complete the function. So to complete the function is just to create and append the new user into the app_state.users list, which is our fake database for now. I'm not attaching any external databases like Postgres and MySQL to just keep the tutorial simple. So I need to generate a new ID because we don't have the ID in the raw user information. So I just need to create a new ID, so which should be the next possible integer that I have not used for the existing user IDs. So if you look at the last page in the users list, it's gonna be 99. So this is the largest integer ID that I have used, and the new ID ideally should be the max ID plus 1, which will be 100. So for now, what I'm gonna do is I need to iterate through the list of users and get the maximum of the IDs and increment it by 1. So my new ID will be the maximum of the list of IDs for user in app.state.users. So what I'm doing here is I'm iterating through the users and getting each user in the users list, and from that user I want the user.id, not just id, I want the user.id. So this list, this will be just the list of IDs. Okay, so it will iterate through the users list and extract the IDs and put them into a new list, which is wrapped here with the square brackets, and from that I'm getting the max value and I'm going to increment it by 1 so that I have the new ID. So once I have the new ID, I can I can just create the new user just like this. User class, we already have it, so ID would be new ID, and I'm just gonna forward this. Okay, so I have created the new user, and the only remaining thing is to append that into my fake database, which is my users list in app.state. So start append new user, and at the end of the function I can just return a message saying that user created. Cool, we can now go ahead and test it out. So as you can see that the last user that we have in the database is Catalina with ID 99. So if I create a new user and go to 21st page, I should see our new user. So I'm just going to reset this, start from the beginning. So I'm going to the create user endpoint. I'm just going to try it out and then give the name as new user, and the email is also going to be new user, and the picture URL, just to keep things clear and simple, I'm not going to leave it like a string here. So to keep things simple, I'm just using the URL of some other user just to have a valid URL. So if I just execute this, you can see that the user is created, and if I go to the 21st page, as expected, we should see a new user with 100 as his ID. Yes, there we have it. So we have a new user with ID 100, and the total is also updated nicely with our pagination endpoint. And to complete everything, so usually when you create a new object in a database or in an API, we need to get a 200 response, which you can specify here itself with the status code in the decorator in FastAPI. So they have something called status, which has a bunch of constants, which I will show you in a second. So if I just quickly import the status from FastAPI, they have already provided many commonly used HTTP response codes, and we are going to use the 201. So this is nothing but 201. So now we will be getting 201. That completes our create user endpoint. Similarly, I can have the patch endpoint for update user. Okay, so and the function name is also going to be update user, which will also which could also take the same class user info, but to update a user we must know the ID of the user. Only with the ID the API knows which user to update. So here I'm going to use the user itself, not the raw user model. So the user info will be the actual user class, and we are going to extract that from the body itself. So let me just quickly refresh the Swagger UI to check if everything is good. Just give me a second. Okay, we have an error. Okay, it is not path, it's patch. So there you have it. So we have a new patch endpoint, which is our update user, and it is going to take the ID, new name, the new email address, and new picture URL. So if you want to leave the email address or the picture URL same, you can just update the name and send the same email and picture back again. This is something that is completely depending on your use case. Okay, so now let's complete the update user function. So to update a particular user, I need his user ID, and user ID is not just enough because we don't have a database here. All we have is just the app.state.users, which is just a Python list. If I need to update a particular user, I need to know his index. So I first need to iterate through that list and find out the index, which I'm gonna call index, and I'm gonna use a function called next, which will take an iterable and a default return value. So in my case, I'm gonna return none if I could not find anything in the particular list. And this first argument is an iterable. So that iterable is just going to be our for loop for user in app.state.users. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I need to tell what should be returned here. So what I want it to be returned is the index of that particular user element. So I also need to get the index, so I'm gonna change it to enumerate, so which is going to give me the index 2 along with the user element. So then I will return the index. But what is our condition? Actually, this is not next, it is next. And in which case should we return? So the return case must be when user object the user which I am currently iterating through has an ID which is equal to my request user ID. So my request object is the user info object and dot ID. So if this condition satisfies, which means this particular user is the user which I need to update, and I am returning the particular index. So once I have that index, I'm gonna change it to the latest user. So app.state.users of index is equal to user info. So it will just replace that particular element, and I can also respond with user updated, just so the user knows that the API has returned successfully executed. So before moving forward, I just would like to show you an example to give more clarity on the next function, in case you don't know that before. So here I just have a class A which has an init method. So the constructor just takes in an argument I and just has an attribute I. And here I'm just initializing a list of objects of A with attribute I ranging from 0 to 9. Okay, so on this I use the next function, and in the first argument I just gave the condition to be I double equals to 2. So whenever this condition satisfies in the list, it will just return that particular index, that particular attribute I. So in our case, we already have I ranging from 0 to 9, so it returned it 2. So what if I try to search for 20? We don't have the range until 20, so it just returned the default value, and you could not see anything because it returned none. None means nothing. So that's how the next function works. Let me just refresh the Swagger UI. I think there is an issue in the code. Okay, it is not running. Let me just run that quickly. We don't have any issues, and reload. Okay, so let me see. Let me try to update one of the users. Okay, let me check the first page and see what who is the first user. Okay, so the first user is Jamie Furset. So I'm going to send the same user and try to update her. So I'm going to update the first user by trying the update user endpoint and sending the same, but except I'm going to say Jamie Jackson. So the ID should still be the same, because only with the ID the API could identify which user it should be updating actually. So I'm gonna execute that, and I get a user updated message. So now if I go ahead and check, and in this response I should see Jamie Jackson here and in the email as well, but the ID should be still the same. So once I execute that, yes, you can see that it's Jamie Jackson. It is updated neatly, and you can also see that the total is still 100. Because of the refresh, the user that we created earlier, it will be removed, because FastAPI on every reload it is just fetching the data from the random user API, so that is just fine. And in the same way, let me quickly write the delete endpoint, which is fairly simple. Yes, you guessed it. So for this I just need the ID itself. I don't need anything else, because based on the ID we can just complete the process. So nothing much is needed, and I'm just leaving it as a query parameter for now, just for the sake of simplicity. And I'm doing the same thing here. I'm finding the index, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pop state users pop, and I'm going to give the index. So it's going to pop that particular user. So we just forgot to handle an edge case here. So the edge case, actually here it's just the user ID. It's not user info dot ID, because we are just getting the user ID, right? So what we missed is that in case we don't find the user with that particular index, so in that case what should we do? So in that case we should be raising an HTTP exception, which also will be provided by FastAPI, which is a cool thing, and also a really good practice to have in your production applications. So just import the HTTP exception, and wherever you want to reject with a particular error message or something, you can just use this HTTP exception class, and you can give the status code, which again will come from our FastAPI status dot HTTP, and you can say maybe not found. It is 404 HTTP 404. Sorry guys, HTTP 404 not found. And you can say you can also give another parameter called detail, and you can also give the headers, but I am just leaving it to detail for now. And you can say that user does exist. Okay, I'm just gonna put an escape sequence here. So yeah, there you have it, and same goes for the delete endpoint also. And it completely depends on actually you need an if condition, right? So let me just add that as well. If not index, so only if the index is none, you would be raising this HTTP exception. So FastAPI returns with this particular status code and detail under the hood. You don't have to do anything else. So it's pretty cool. So now let me there is an issue for us. Invalid asks for response file. Okay, we're getting that. Just go ahead. Okay. Okay, it should be an int, not an ID. ID is not a type. Let me just run that again. Cool, we have it running. Now let me quickly reload. Go to docs. We have a delete endpoint, which is very bright with red color. And let me check the first page out and see who is the first user, and then we can delete the first user. So we can see that it's Olelko. Sorry about the pronunciation, I don't know. So let me just pass the ID to the delete endpoint 0, and let me execute that. Okay, we get user doesn't exist. So I found out why it is returning user does not exist, because if I have a user or if I send a user ID 0, then not of 0 would be true. So it would think that the user does not exist, right? So what I should actually be doing is, if index is none, so that should fix our issue. If index is none, then it would actually check if the index is really none or not, or it should not give any issues for us in case of 0 index. So let me just quickly reload that and see who is our 0th user. Execute, and we have Akash as our 0th user. Let me try to delete him, and we got no response, but a 200 status code, which means the user is deleted. So let's go ahead and check if Akash still is the first user. Let me execute. Nope. So we successfully removed Akash from our fake database list. And you can also add an additional thing here. And usually for delete endpoints, I've also seen people not even responding with this, so that they are just going to respond with an HTTP OK, even if the user does not exist. But for now, we can just leave it like this. This works for us also. So there you have it, guys. You have our nice create endpoint, so that you can do the create operation. You have our get users endpoint, by which you can read the users, and you have the update user endpoint, through which you can do the update, and same goes for the delete users endpoint. And that's all, guys. That is how you do basic CRUD operations in FastAPI. For now, we did not use any real database. We just had a fake database list, and we just tried to manipulate that. You can try that out with real databases and let me know in the comment section. And I hope you liked the video and learned something from that. And please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. And the source code link will be in the pinned comment. Thank you, guys. Thanks for watching, and happy coding as always. Bye bye.